Hey everybody, Phil Graham here, creator of the Beneficiary Liquidity Plan. I'm very thankful today to have two friends of mine, Nick Narduli, who is a wealth manager, has worked with estate planning attorney Craig Janis for over 22 years. Together, they have over 1,500 estate planning clients. Nick does a ton of insurance, ton of wealth management. Wealth transfer is a big part of his business. Craig's a third generation estate planning attorney, and his family has over 100 years of estate planning experience. And so what I wanted to do today was ask these, what I consider estate planning experts, some questions that I think that you might not know the answer to. Because what I've found through my 20 plus years of doing this is a lot of people have this vision in their head of what they want to happen. They have this vision in this head of what they think is going to happen. But the reality of it is when they pass away, that's not what actually happens, but it's too late once you've passed away. So Nick and Craig, thank you guys for being on today. So let's start with something kind of basic. And Nick, you and I kind of joke about this when we're talking about executors of someone's estate. And I think you say, whoever you like the least, that's who should be the executor of your estate, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a big responsibility. I mean, everybody takes such pride in their name and their executor, right, Craig? It's like, do you realize what you're really putting that person through? I mean, you're not here to see the problems, right?
Well, so let's talk about that, Craig. So what are exactly, I know these are general terms, it's different for every family, but in general, what is the responsibility of the executor when that loved one passes away?
Yeah, the executor's job is fairly straightforward. They've got to settle the estate, pay the final bills, which is very important, and deal with any disputes that may arise and settle those and make sure the estate is distributed according to the instructions that were left behind.
And so is that like looking through the will, looking through any trust that the family has? What's their guide for successfully navigating that process?
You could leave behind a will, a trust, or just general instructions that you told your loved one, the executor, whoever you put in charge of it. There's different terms for each of these people: executor, successor, trustee, personal representative. But in essence, it's all the same. You've left some instructions in some way, shape, or form, and you're hoping this person can carry them out as easily as possible.
So I'm assuming the funeral arrangements are part of that. So is the executor responsible for the funeral arrangements, or again, does that depend on what's written in the documents, if anything?
Yeah, it's written in the documents. Every state's different. Some states have a separate document. Sometimes it's in the will, or again, sometimes it's just what the person is told, the executor, please do this when I pass away.
Now, I've looked at more than I can count copies of living trusts or revocable trusts that families have. And a lot of times I see a section that's titled funeral and expense section inside that living trust, or maybe even the will. And a lot of times it says, this is what in general, I want to be buried or I want to be cremated. I'd like a celebration of life. But what I've not typically seen is how is the family supposed to access money to pay for the funeral? And so I guess we can be even more broad. You talked about how the executor needs to, pay any bills, expenses, settle the estate, possibly pay for the funeral. How does the executor access money historically to do that? Like, how do they pay those things?
Well, again, that's the huge issue, because quite often it's going to come out of their own pocket, or they have to wait to access the money that the decedent left behind. Both ways are problematic, though.
So they're paying out of pocket, and depending on the family dynamics, and we all talk about at death, family dynamics get a little squirrely because emotions are high. They almost have to plead their case to get reimbursed. I'm guessing either to the family or to a judge. Like, is there a process for them getting paid back?
If it's in court, you certainly can petition the judge to make an issue. Now, that's where the last place we want to be is in court. We're trying to keep us out of court. So yeah, they're going to ask the family to reimburse them. As we've seen, though, most of the time, money brings out the best in us. And certainly when you have a death, things are amplified, and we have in-laws putting their 2 cents in. It rarely goes as smoothly as people hope it will.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to Nick's point of that puts a lot of pressure on that executor to possibly put it on their own credit cards or their own bank accounts, and then probably causes a lot of disagreements and arguments amongst family. But unfortunately,
but Phil, I think the other problem is people don't realize, and that's what I love about your beneficiary liquidity plan, is when you name a beneficiary on something and somebody passes away, right? You don't get a do-over, do you? It's
No.
over.
Right.
You know, and whoever you named, okay, especially we see this a lot. It happened to my own family with my own wife and her brothers and sisters. They were beneficiaries of a large retirement plan. They had no financial obligation to help pay the final expenses because it went to their name. That's a problem.
So they got the money, but had no obligation to contribute towards those expenses.
Remember, Craig?
Yeah, exactly. They're kind of left holding the bag, right? You say, wait a minute, I've got these expenses, I've got interest, I got late fees coming on. Hey, can everybody contribute? And they've all just gone their own way. Hard to track down, even harder to get the money back from them.
Yeah. And to your point, Nick, what we see happen is normally somebody in the family is deemed more successful than maybe the other family members. Those other family members go, well, you make more money than me, so you should just eat it. I need it more than you do, even though that's not what mom and dad wanted. You know, but that's what ultimately happened.
You know, Bill, you know what I love about your plan, and this is where you're passionate. Well-intended things have unintended consequences, right? You know, and look at your own situation you talked to me about in your own family. And it's just like, it's the parents, they want equality. They're not spending the money and time to meet people like us to do it the right way.
Well, and we talk a lot about the number one mistake that we see in estate planning is not properly funding the estate plan. Just having paper documents does not solve the problem. You need to make sure that everything is titled properly, there's funded properly. And that's really where the beneficiary liquidity plan comes into play. Is we just talked about how, and we're going to get into this in more detail in some of our other segments, but we just talked about how the executor doesn't have access to any money. They're having to wait for the death certificate and the claims process to start unwinding the estate, but yet bills are due. Funeral expenses, travel expenses, celebration of life, potential attorney fees, other taxes that may need to be paid. That's why we created the beneficiary liquidity plan, is we use assets that the family is already going to inherit. So people don't have to buy more of anything. They're just determining how much money do they think their executor or beneficiaries are going to need for that first 30, 45, 60 days until everything can start unwinding. And then we simply move it from their left pocket to their right pocket. It's still their money. It's just allocated to the beneficiary liquidity plan, so that on one of the worst days of their family's life, the day they pass away, it's not a burden. This is not about leaving more money. It's the same money.
Well,
we're
Phil,
just making sure they get access to it.
Phil, I'll beg to differ with you for a second. Whether they're an executor, successor, trustee, they still got to wait to get the damn money and access to it. I mean, whether it's a will or a trust, am I wrong, Craig? They still got to wait for death certificates. They can't really get into those accounts and prove themselves until they have that. So they're still hand tied also, right?
Anytime someone dies, it's not an easy process, but paying the final bills and all the last expenses, it's a vital part. To be able to take that off the table and not have to worry about it is a great benefit to give the children. And
using money that they're going to inherit anyway. So you're not having to buy more of anything. It's just carving that little piece out that you've already mentally earmarked.